library. That was kind of a weird one to me because there's a few libraries that still don't work. I kept on trying to import JSON, which would be super useful for REST clients, but for some reason it wouldn't let me import JSON. So some of the standard library is in there. So if we run this, oh yeah, I should probably take you through what the code is doing as well. It's just defining a Python 3 tag and then printing to the console. So on page load, you get hello world, which is cool. And so I think under the hood, that essentially is a console.log, but it still means we can write Python. Example 2 is pretty similar, but they also give us access to the HTML document, right? Because you want to, if you're going to run Python in your browser, the most useful part of that is to be able to access the HTML DOM. Like that's kind of the reason for it. So this is, here we've got a heading with an ID, and then we're grabbing that ID, and then we're setting the content of that heading to hello world. So if I open up example 2, whoa. Example 2, hello world, amazing. Here, what does this do? So this is creating an input. I've hard-coded the value in there just for kind of proof of concept reasons. And this is grabbing the ID in exactly the same way as we were before, and then grabbing the value and then printing the value. Cool. Down here we get that value that was set in here. Perfect. And then the last one. This is similar, but now we don't have to statically assign the value. Cool. Great. Okay, so what next? Right? Surely just like put them together, right? And then you've got Rject. Well, it was a little bit more complicated than that. It was, I don't know, I ran into a lot of problems. It's sort of, you can talk to me about it later if you want. It's sort of not worth mentioning here. Python does some weird stuff, like every import is actually a GET request, which means that if you're hosting Python on a different server, as in grabbing it from a CDN, then you get a whole bunch of cause errors. Also, the way that I'm populating the content for this means that it's hard to insert CSRF tokens, which makes it really difficult. So I ended up having to turn all of the security off on my project, but that's okay. So here we go. This is my to-do list app. So over here we've got the form. I can enter text in there, add it to the to-do list. I've already got an example to-do item at the moment. This is reminding me to safdas later. So if we add this, it says error. It's not actually an error. I don't know why that comes up. But if we refresh the page now, for some reason, half the time that you load the page, stuff comes up twice. I don't know why. If we reload the page again, it kind of does some weird stuff. But yeah. But this is actually making a successful post request to the API that we defined earlier. And this list here is actually making a successful GET request. This GET request, interestingly, is happening on the server side, so it's technically server-side rendered, and the post request is happening in the browser, so it's client-side rendered. I don't know, I guess. But it's kind of, there are a lot of limitations to what was possible in this, so there was a lot of funky stuff that I had to do to get this working. But basically, it's half client-side, half server-side rendered, and it works, which is amazing. So that's, there were a few other things that I wanted to show. This get thing is just showing what you would actually get from the server. last thing. So this is actually the final app. This is the form, the to-do list, and then the buttons down the bottom. And then there's some other stuff going on here. You can see it's a mix of actual HTML elements and then like nested kind of actual components that I've created. There's a little bit of logic, but it's actually not too bad and weirdly still looks like React somehow. I mean, not completely, but it looks a lot more similar than I was expecting it to. How am I going for time, by the way?
We have 8 minutes.
Oh, okay. Oh, heaps. I'm almost done. So a couple of things. That was the GET request to the server. This one was an interesting example. So if you can't read because it's down the bottom, it just says on click print. I thought this was going to like print some stuff, but no. If I click this button, it sure. Yeah, I don't know. So you've got to be careful with where you write your Python, I guess. So where are we at? I guess I'll just keep doing this. So what are the positives? Surprisingly, it's not too bad to write. It's pretty obvious what's happening. The code is pretty clear. I think that's probably more a benefit of Python than anything I did. Rject doesn't suffer from the growing pains of regular React. Unlike React, where every few weeks they introduce new functional components, hooks, or remove state for some reason, Rject will remain consistent, mainly due to the fact that it will never be updated. I thought I was going to come, there's another dot point there. I thought I was going to come up with a third thing, but I could only think of 2 positives. So what are the negatives? I can only import standard library, and for some reason some of the standard library, which means no request modules. That would have been amazing when I was working with the REST API. The packed module doesn't, the reason I had to server-side render half of it is because packed can't run in your browser because it has third-party libraries that aren't part of the standard library. So you can't run it with Python, which is super annoying. Which therefore means that there's no Rject in the browser. It's all server-side rendered and then a little bit of Python done on the front end. It's super slow because it transpiles to Python. It's always going to be, sorry, it transpiles to JavaScript. It's always going to be slower than JavaScript. It's buggy, as you guys saw, and it kind of sucks. More negatives. All Python must be labeled as Python. On-click print doesn't work. Python imports with GET requests. That was super annoying. As a potential fix, this is very easy for me to say and probably super hard to actually implement. But it would have actually been way better if I could just have a script tag that's like an egg or a wheel, like a Python egg, and then have an import statement running like from, and then be able to use import statements on that. But yeah, that wasn't possible. Error messages have very little to do with the code. The reason that is because the compiled app looks very, very different to the uncompiled app that has JSX in it. Also, the community is small. In fact, it's just me. So seriously, what was the point of all this? There was actually some good points. I just realized I forgot a couple of things, but it's all right. One of the things that I did while developing this was I discovered editable pip modules. They are super cool. If you've ever, the reason I can do this, as in install Rject from like a non, I don't know what you call that, like a non-local path. Instead of doing that, I can just do that. Is because pip has this great functionality where you can go pip install dot and then as an editable format, and that'll package up your current directory as a wheel or an egg, and then you can import that anywhere, and if you update anything in your current directory, it'll update the wheel. It's magic. It made my life so much easier. What else? Python was actually pretty cool. Project and app templates were pretty cool. That was actually, the last thing was the other thing that I was going to show you guys, but, well, yeah, sure, I'll show you. Where is that? So, here it is. I don't know, as a junior developer, I've been struggling with context in Python a little bit. I find it like really hard to work with until I discovered that you can actually just write regular functions in your class-based components and then access them with the view tag. So if I write a function called content, then I can write view.content in my template and I'll get the return value of that function. That for me has made context issues so much simpler, and I highly recommend doing that. Yeah, so that's kind of it as far as I can remember. There's probably more. It was actually super complicated, but talk to me after if you're still interested. Yeah, I thrive on validation through online platforms, so please add all my stuff. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam.
That was art.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think we'll need